when many people were on the floor, arguing, debating, compromising, deciding on what to take, when to leave out, there was a group of people that were on the higher level. You remember when we were on the floor at CODESA? At the roof, or just under the roof, there was a level where there were administration offices. In one of those conference rooms, there was a group of people that many days and weeks I spent most of my time. And that group of people was praying that punches should not cause blood to flow on the floor. Because there were days when different parties digged in their heels that many thought the only way out would be to fight. Remember when the late Eugene Tereblanche drove in with a truck and his army, and we thought everything was going to be lost. But because of that group of people that I think we must give credit to, that prayed, and many South Africans who did not want civil war, who prayed because they knew about the seriousness of the situation, common sense ultimately prevailed. So I thought it was important even to give credit to those who are not here with us, who were praying that there would be understanding, there would be peace, there would be a willingness to give and take among those that were negotiating. But to answer your very interesting question, that everybody uses the Constitution. I think the Constitution is definitely a document that has embraced most people's aspirations. It is a document that does not belong to the select few, but it's a document that belongs to all South Africans. The give and take during the process caused the Constitution to include what most people believed was representing their positions. When you talk about the students, when the students say fees must fall, they would also refer to their constitutional right. Interestingly, there is a debate going on in the churches right now about what the CRL Commission has recommended. And all those people who are also arguing their positions, they are saying, I have constitutional right. The Constitution guarantees our beliefs, the right to believe. So the Constitution has managed to include people's aspirations, and as a result, I believe it is a legitimate document that causes most South Africans to embrace it, to say it is not their document, but it is our document. Thank you.
Another distinguished member of our panelists has been involved in the process from the beginning, from CODESA, through to the multi-party negotiations, through to the Constitutional Assembly. And along that road, she has also changed from one political party to another. That it was negotiated with all the parties present. It was as inclusive as possible, not just at the party political level, but it was inclusive at the level of trying to bring in the 40 million people in our country into that process. So, if I may say, Mrs. Kemmerer, your contribution to this legitimacy.
I just need help to get this mic to work. I'm going to change mic. Can you hear me? No. Ah, there we are. Hello. Thank you, Mac. You are a scary person, as you mentioned. I remember as a negotiator at the World Trade Center, there was an institution called the Channel, and you and Rolf Meyer presided over it. And if the negotiating parties on a particular aspect of the Constitution couldn't agree, you were summoned to the Channel, and you were interrogated by the Channel and asked why you haven't agreed. And then you were told to go away and reach agreement. And that was you. So you're still pretty scary there. I knew you were going to raise the fact that as a negotiator, I was a member of the National Party. In fact, I was in then President F.W. de Klerk's government. And when he appointed me Deputy Minister of Justice, he said to me, "You're going to thank me always for this, because you're going to be our main negotiator on the Bill of Rights at Cadessa." And so I agree, it was the most exciting part of my life, being part of the negotiating process from the day one at Cadessa and the World Trade Center, the multi-party process, and then in the Constitutional Assembly till the very last day. I want to make one or two points about the legitimacy aspect. I think the fact that it was a totally inclusive process at Cadessa and the World Trade Center. I think we were 19 to 20 negotiating parties. Where all these political parties came from, who knows? A lot of them were never heard of and seen again. But it did reach out to the community, as you said, and include the then 40 million people in our country. And I think it was viewed as an inclusive process then. But of course, then we had the democratic elections. And so the Constitutional Assembly that finalized the Constitution were duly elected representatives of the people. And I think that's a very important point as far as legitimacy goes. We had every possible opportunity to get advice from every possible entity in our country. The most skilled technical experts gave us advice, and civil society had ample opportunity to make submissions, and the duly elected representative of the people voted on the clauses of our Constitution and adopted it. So I don't think there can be any question of its legitimacy. And I think the way we all saw it was a kind of compromise on what we would like the future of our country to be. And may I just say a couple of remarks about the fact that I think it stood up incredibly well. And in terms of the role of our Constitutional Court, our Constitution has proved itself to be magnificently justiciable. In a sense, we have become leaders on the international juristic stage, shall I say, in terms of the development of second-generation rights. For instance, I think the first key case was the Grootboom case on access to housing, and so it's gone on from there. And so we've achieved huge recognition for the work that our Constitutional Court has done in terms of these rights, which, Madam Speaker, you mentioned as well. And you mentioned the fact that it was a compromise, and I agree with you. I just want to say a couple of remarks. I negotiated the Bill of Rights from the first day to the last. It was always my area of negotiation, so I cannot make any remarks about the Council of Provinces. But may I make one or two remarks about the Bill of Rights? Okay. I just want to say that it's great fun. It's to me to be here as a real blast from the past with a few other members of that group. Because the last time I was here, I was a Democratic Alliance Member of Parliament 8 years ago. Thank you.
And nonetheless, you remain a saboteur. Ah, there it is. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Camera, for introducing the conversational tone. I can now call you Sheila. I forgot to mention that in her journey, the last stop she made was ambassador of the Republic of South Africa. Thank you for representing our country. Already in the contributions and in everybody's mind, there is a concept that during the period that we negotiated, South Africa was on the brink of disaster. What few people realize is that throughout the the negotiations at Cadessa, the country was plunged into violence. And I think that when the story is told about the making of our constitution, we forget the important role of two structures that came into being. One was the National Peace Accord and its secretariat, and the second was the role of the Goldstone Commission. So, many countries, when they try to negotiate out of conflict, are still seized with conflict, but they do not have this mechanism that we had. It was not a mechanism that we created consciously, but when we look back, we realize that so many incidents that would have jammed and deadlocked the negotiations and killed it failed to do so because of the presence of the Peace Secretariat and the work of the Goldstone Commission. Fali Musa, you lived through that period. Reflect for a moment on this issue that when you're negotiating out of conflict and the country is still seized with that conflict, where do they create a mechanism? Should our experience be told in such a way that it transmits the message that such a mechanism is needed as a safety valve to allow the negotiations to continue?
You could have warned me about the question. Madam Speaker and Chair of the National Council of Provinces, members of Parliament present here, Judge Goldstone, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is an enormous honor and privilege for me to be given the opportunity to participate in the launch of the events towards the observance of the 20th anniversary of the Constitution. What former Minister Mac Maharaj is referring to is that in 1990, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and the ANC was unbanned and other political parties were unbanned, we were in a state of enormous conflict. There was a war out there. And the liberation movement was of the view that if there were to be negotiations between the oppressor and the oppressed, then the negotiations had to take place on an equal footing. And there had to be what we were referring to at that time as a leveling of the playing field. We couldn't be going to the negotiating table when the other side were carrying guns or threatening to kill us or threatening to arrest us. In 1990, when the ANC was unbanned, many of us as individuals were banned people at the time or in prison. So we had a whole string of an item of things that needed to be done to level the playing field, which included release of political prisoners, et cetera, those sorts of things. One of the preconditions we had was that the violence must be ended and that the regime should stop its violence against the people of South Africa. And that was the demand in 1990, 1991. And in fact, what happened was rather than the violence being brought to an end, it escalated. We had a tremendous amount of blood being spilled throughout the country. It was one of the most intensely violent periods for us. And we just said, there is no way that we can negotiate while we're being shot at, and that the negotiations would not be legitimate. But then we had reached a point where we had to, where we began to understand that actually the National Party, or the apartheid regime, as you called it at the time, more accurately, actually did not have the power to bring the violence to an end. That it, in fact, we were negotiating with two entities, the government of the Republic of South Africa at the time and the National Party, and neither of those had the ability to bring violence to an end. And we came to the realization that, in fact, violence was very much part of the fabric of apartheid. And if one of our preconditions was that the violence should end completely, before we negotiate the end to apartheid, we were in fact asking for the end to apartheid before we negotiate the end to apartheid, because it was inseparable. And so it was under those conditions that we had, in fact, started the negotiations in a climate of violence. And that violence didn't end right until the 27th of April 1994, when we had the first democratic elections. You would remember in the days leading up to the elections, and on the first election day, there were bombs planted all over Johannesburg by the white right wing that was opposing the change that was coming about. So that's what happened. And I think that what you're referring to, you know, the various peace initiatives, etc., were essential ingredients to that. But for me, you would remember, Mr. Moderator, that internally in the ANC, we refer to it as the strategic shift. And there's still a paper about that somewhere in the archives of the ANC, which we didn't, of course, share fully with the National Party at that time, but we had decided at the time that some of these preconditions were not fulfillable.
Thank you very much, Vali. I did notice you stumbled when you wanted to refer to me as Comrade Mac, so you ended up by saying Mr. Moderator. But I just want to take us a little back. The peace accord was an initiative from the private sector and civil society. That was the initiator. And I'm mentioning that because when people speak about the necessity for negotiated resolution, already that peace accord emerging from the civil society was an indicator that more than the political parties were thinking of the need for a transfer to democracy via negotiations. But in that context, I don't know how many have seen the video, The Bloody Miracle. What is startling about the Bloody Miracle is that General Groenewald has acknowledged on camera that up to the 23rd of April 1994, they had in motion a plan with the agreement of Savimbi in Angola that they would kidnap the leadership of the ANC and the cabinet and fly them secretly to southern Angola and hold them prisoners and force them to negotiate. But on that record, he says, they called off that operation on the 23rd of April 1994, which is 4 days before the election. They called it off because an accord was signed. So, Dr. Wessels, you were in the thick of that. One of the things that we put in the interim constitution was a provision for a false start council. And I know your own position, because when I was in detention in 1990, I smuggled a newspaper and read that a certain deputy minister speaking in some Scandinavian country said that apartheid was a mistake. And I wrote it on my wall so that when they came to interrogate me, I said, but your minister says apartheid was a mistake. Why are you locking me up? But be that as it may, back to this question. That's how delicate the situation was. And that possibility of blocking the negotiations was centered in the Afrikaner right wing. When you think back about that, and you think about the accord that was signed, and the provision we made in the interim constitution for a false start council, was it something that we did with a gun held to our temple? Or was it something that, as we grappled with the reality, we realized we needed a way forward.
Thank you so, Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, Chairperson of the NCOP, it's a privilege being in your company again and having the good fortune to sit in this chair. And let me say publicly to all that have now listened to Mac Maharaj, this is not the first time that he has ambushed me. So it doesn't come as a surprise. Let me refresh your memory. There was an occasion when CODESA was entertaining a visit by Mr. Eugene Terblanche, unannounced. And on that occasion, it was of paramount importance to do two things. First of all, to demonstrate to the world that we will not be derailed from our objectives to find an inclusive negotiated agreement. Getting the wheels back on track, fixing the walls that had been broken. Rolf and Cyril were occupied. This is now Rolf Meyer and Cyril Ramaphosa, and they said outside this building was a delegation, and they were making representations regarding to land. And it was agreed that Rolf and Cyril were too occupied, but they needed representatives to demonstrate to this delegation that negotiations will continue regardless of this interruption. So they asked Mac and me to face this delegation. I didn't hear the interjection, but I do remember, I do remember. Come again? No, I have to involve you because I remember how you ambushed me. We were standing there in the glare of publicity showing to the world we are ready to negotiate. And what did Mac do? He raised his fist and his right hand and he said, Amandla. And there I was standing representing F.W. de Klerk and Rolf Meyer, and I knew I had to do something, otherwise Mac was going to blow me out of the water, and this delegation was not even going to listen to me. I raised my left fist and I said, Viva negotiations, viva! Long and behold, after this, Mac said, you know, I'm available to give you special lessons. And shouting, Amandla, I said, no, Mac, that's not how you go about the business. You must remember, if I had raised my right hand there and said, Amandla, I would have been blown out of the water. F.W. de Klerk would have dismissed me there and then. And the left arm comes from the heart. And that is what negotiation is all about. Long and behold, those who had observed this on television wrote a letter to Mr. de Klerk, and they said, that Leon Wessels, that guy cannot be trusted. First of all, he had apologized for apartheid. And now secondly, there he's making common ground with Mac Maharaj and raising his fist in the air. Now that is the heart of the matter. The heart of the matter was that there was a critical moment in the negotiating process when we realized that we cannot negotiate on behalf of white Afrikaner right-wingers. We could only create space for them to present their own case. And that is when that particular final accord, how that came about. Let me just say in conclusion, I have to tell you that when I watched this video earlier on, and I listened to my own words, and on the clock, I had said my notes demanded that I close the proceedings at 12, and you would remember they showed it was 12 o'clock. After 2 years of hard work, we were a little bit lackadaisical here towards the end. The record will reflect I adjourned the proceedings at 8 minutes past 12. after 2 years of work. Never in my life had I witnessed such commitment again as I had witnessed then. And today I want to applaud those behind the scenes who prepared the paperwork, who prepared draft after draft after draft. A remarkable group of people, and I am so happy that I was a part of that.
Thank you very much, Leon, although I know that you would always try to expose me. But that's normal for a member of the National Party. Yes. However, you've raised a question about land and property. Now, many, many books have been written about South Africa's transition, and some of them claim that the property clause arose because the National Party Old Order insisted on it and wanted such a thing, and it was a compromise. We have amongst us, as can I call a Comrade Badega Mbete, reminded us, a member of the Constitutional Committee of the ANC established in 1986 by President Tambo. Bridget Mabandla, you were part of that committee. My memory says you in the Constitutional Committee recommended that there should be a property clause. Am I right?
Speaker, Chairperson of, this one. I must say that I'm taken aback by the very difficult question that's put to me. Let me salute the chair, the speaker and the chair of the NCOP, the deputies, honorable members, distinguished guests, I may say also esteemed indeed, young people, our future, our leaders. Please indulge me, Comrade Mac. Let me attempt the first, even if it's to concur with those that said, answering your first question, those that said that the Constitution is popular because there was inclusivity. And I want to say from the very onset, even before the ink dried on the Grootskir Minute, efforts were being made to galvanize our people to talk about talks that were to begin. I'm talking 1990 now. And I must say also that the ANC was prepared, thoroughly prepared. It had a base. The Constitutional Committee was expanded. Your Arthur Chaskalson, your late Pius Langa, your late Judge Square, your Fink Haysom, many, many indeed progressive lawyers of the time were actually part of the collective. We worked very hard to even be part of mobilization of women. The establishment of the Women's Coalition was no accident. It was a well thought out plan, and we reached out. That's where I first met Sheila Camera and other members of other political parties. And that was a strategy, and it worked. It was successful. But also, at another level, we worked hard. We were aware of the situation of children in the country, especially after the Harare conference on children. OR was very clear that that constitution must protect the rights of the child. maybe if the time allows at a later stage, we will talk about socioeconomic rights. But just directly to the property clause. We were very clear as the delegates, whether it was to CODESA or to the subsequent negotiations in Parliament, that we had a responsibility to address the property matter in a way that allows for redress around land. But as we have heard the speaker, these were negotiations. What we have in the Constitution, we think, in fact, that it was the best to allow for the return of land, to redistribute land. That matter, of course, is still pending. It's one that still has to be discussed going forward. It was a difficult one, moderator. I would have wanted to answer that one at the end. But the ANC wants restitution for its people who were removed from land, who were excluded. And I think that policy still stands.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I have a request from Prince Buthelezi. He's got a flight to catch, and he's recommending that Mr. Nkwango, IFP member and member of Parliament, should take his place. So kindly do so, Mr. Nkwango. Mr. Prince Buthelezi, you are excused, and we hope you have a pleasant flight. In the meantime, thank you very much, Bridget, for that explanation. I need to put on the record that reference that the speaker made to the Constitutional Committee of the ANC needs to be written up and made public, because it is a body that was set up in 1986, before negotiations started. And it contained not just decisions on land and property, it confronted a whole set of issues in a very particular context and found a way forward. So it anticipated problems and it looked at matters from a problem-solving point of view. But I think that what this recollection is doing to me, and I hope you all share it, that we need to understand our past. If we don't understand it, we will have a problem. And that's what I want you to address now, because whilst we talk about the widespread acceptance of our Constitution, the reality is that amongst young people there is a sense of disdain about our past. There is a sense that what happened in the 90s was more a sellout. And maybe part of it is that we haven't told the story properly. It's not their fault. It's our fault. So this is something that I'd like the panel to address. With all this acclaim for our Constitution, why is there sense of disdain amongst the young people for this Constitution, where it is seen as a sellout? Sheila?
Thank you. Can I just answer your question by referring to the Bill of Rights, which is the part I know most? I mean, it was, I think it was the speaker, Honourable Speaker, who mentioned the really difficult clauses in the Bill of Rights: education, labour rights, property rights. And all of those, in a sense, dealt with our past, and we tried to overcome our past in them. If you remember, the labour rights clause does not include lockout in the end. There was a compromise reached, and actually bodies were established to negotiate outside the constitutional arena between business and labor, and I think that was a very positive thing. Then there were the education clause was resolved similarly, where we overcame our past in that sense and looked to the future. And similarly in property rights. But I want to agree with Bridget, and in fact you can go far as back as the Declaration of Rights in the French Revolution, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which were listed as liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. So it's a very old right, and the question is, how did we deal with it? And I think we dealt with it by way of a compromise in a very progressive manner in the Bill of Rights. I don't think the property rights clause itself inhibits any restitution, which during the negotiations was indeed the ANC's position that restitution was all important in terms of property rights. So it was a very last-minute resolution of that negotiation. In fact, when we posed for our team picture as constitutional negotiations in the Constitutional Assembly, it still had not been resolved. And shortly after that photograph was taken, Rolf Mayer came to me and said, Deputy President Mbeki wants to know what the wording is that we want. And I said, here it is, took it out of my pocket and gave it to him, because we all knew what we wanted. And in fact, the clause was resolved thereafter between the top negotiators. So it was problematic. But can I say what I think is one of the most wonderful clauses in the Bill of Rights as far as the future goes is the equality clause, particularly as it affects women. And I agree with the point that Bridget made about the Women's Coalition. It was a very positive thing. It commenced cooperation between women of all political parties, and the result was a fabulous clause, a groundbreaking clause, recognized as such internationally as well, our equality clause. It's extremely extensive, and it's laid down a new norm for equality clauses internationally. So I think we're looking to the future, particularly there. Thank you.
Thank you. In the spirit of revisiting the past and taking revenge in the present, in the interim constitution, our rights begin with the equality clause. Number 2 is the right to life. Number 3 is the right to human dignity. Now, Leon Bessels, you were deputy chair of the Constitutional Assembly Commission. When you brought the Bill of Rights for us to adopt the final constitution, you changed the order. In the final constitution, you have the equality clause. Then number 2, you have the right to human dignity. And number 3, you have the right to life. Why did you change it?
I am definitely not going to be so bold as to claim that I changed it. But what I will say is, what were the things that excited me? And what excited me was the transition, legally speaking, and may be referred to as a revolution. In law books, what happened here is referred to as a revolution, because we changed the architecture of our government and of our society altogether. And I think the point that the speaker made referring to Section 1 is paramount. Namely, that those values that we have carved in the Constitution with their special high percentages of entrenchment is what this society and the new architecture is all about. But let me say something, and I now I now rely on not my own words, neither my own experience, but as it was related to me by one of your senior negotiators at the time. When Oliver Tambo charged that group to draft a Bill of Rights, he set aside all his books and he had a blank piece of paper in front of him. And the word that came to mind at that moment in his life was equality, because the past was all about inequality. And that is why equality is given the status it has. But if you have regard to Section 1, it is also pretty clear that equality is not blunt as the word suggests. It is the achievement of equality. And even after 20 years, we still have not achieved equality, and we still aspire to that. Let me, in conclusion, say the remarkable thing about this whole period of negotiation is how the one principle in the 34 principles, namely that everybody is entitled to all universally accepted human rights. That created the space for Eugene Ter Blanche and company to claim self-determination, because self-determination you will find in universally accepted human rights, but it also created the space for equality. The one principle yielded 27 rights, and we have 631 Constitutional Court pronouncements on that.
Thank you. Spoken like a lawyer, avoided my question, but enlightened us. Thank you very much. I now want to call for volunteers because time is running out. Anybody in recalling the past and recalling this wonderful constitution can share with us one regret you have about it. Not many, one regret. And not 2 minutes, 1 minute. Vali.
Yeah, well, to get 2 minutes, I'm even prepared to say Comrade Mac. Your question on human dignity, I just don't want to miss that point. It's fundamental to what happened between the interim constitution and new constitution, and the speaker referred to it. And I'm just going to repeat what the speaker said in her input, because that's the most fundamental thing. That the final constitution, the current constitution, has what are called fundamental values of the constitution. And many of us were of the view, including Leon, because him and I discussed this, I know, one-on-one quite a lot, was should it not be that the fundamental values of the Constitution should be unchangeable by any parliament at all? These should be sacrosanct, not changeable. But we couldn't come to accept that anything man-made should be completely unchangeable. And that's the reason why Section 1 was created, as a mechanism to say to all parliaments of the future, this is not to be changed. And the very first words in Section 1 is human dignity. That's a fundamental value. It's elevated above the Bill of Rights. That's what's happened. It's taken out. The Bill of Rights can be altered by this parliament, but the fundamental values are unalterable. We say 75%, but really what's meant is unalterable. On your question about regrets, you know, I've lived with the constitution-making process for 9 years of my life, 1990 to 1999, when I ended my term as Minister for Constitutional Development. And every day since then and every week, I think about whether we did the right thing or not. And whenever the land question is debated, or whenever the electoral system of proportional representation is debated, I can't help but think about these things. And I always come to the conclusion that we did the right thing. We were bold, we took enlightened and progressive steps, even when it wasn't completely popular. There were people calling for a referendum on the death penalty. We resisted those sorts of things because we knew what the outcome would be. And so we stood firm in doing the right things. The one hole, the one weakness of our Constitution is that it doesn't do anything about the fact that our democratic order places political parties at the center of the functioning of the democratic system. Without political parties, our democratic system doesn't work, and they're an essential component to that. The Constitution does that, but then it does not regulate political parties. And we're the only jurisdiction in the world, democratic jurisdiction, including the only one on the African continent, that does not place any limits on who political parties may raise money from. Does not place any limits on the quantum of money it may get from particular individuals, companies, or foreign governments. Secondly, it does not require political parties to be transparent about where they get money from. So our political parties can take money from anybody. They don't need to tell us, the voters, and they won't be doing anything wrong. It's not allowed anywhere else. And thirdly, as a nation, in other words, through the state, we need to take greater responsibility for funding of political parties, because these are public institutions. They're not private football clubs. We need them for democracy to function. We knew all of this when we were drafting the Constitution, but we walked away from it. It was too complicated. And it's the one thing, if there's one thing that needs to be fixed, and the one thing which this Parliament, under the current leadership of the Speaker and the Chairperson, I think has the opportunity to fill that one hole which we have, which we will regret in the long run if we don't do it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, Madam Chairperson, you realize when you go back to the dustbin of history and resurrect some of us, you're looking for trouble. And Vali has just given you an enormous task. You better attend to it. But colleagues, we're running out of time. There are 12 political parties that want to have a few words. Originally, we planned to give them 4 minutes. May I appeal to them to use 2 minutes for a response? I'd like to conclude this session in a nice way, get rid of all the fights we've had in the past, and make peace for the future. So first of all, I'd like to call on the representative of the Democratic Alliance to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Facilitator and Program Director. It really is great to be here today on this very important occasion. And may I say how great it is to be in the presence of the giants of our democracy, particularly people behind me today, people in the audience from the judiciary, people who played a role behind the scenes. We truly do stand on the shoulders of giants, and I think I speak for all of us in the House when I say that your actions around the Constitution have led to you transcending political parties, and you're all our heroes, no matter what party we belong to. I think it's good that we've gathered to celebrate the 20th anniversary of our Constitution, but I think it's a celebration we should be having every single day, because this truly is the document that has proven to be the blueprint for the new South Africa. I think over the last 3 years as well, the Constitution has been vigorously tested. And the great thing is that it has withstood these tests, and I believe come out stronger for them. To the framers of the Constitution, the resilience that you built into our Constitution has endured, and you can be proud of that. I do just want to spend a little bit of time, if I may, on the separation of powers issues, because I think it's very important that our judiciary are not cowed from taking action and defending our Constitution when it's required. And I think that the De Lille judgment was probably the most clear on this. And I quote from that. Section 2 of the Constitution expressly provides that law or conduct inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid, and the obligations imposed by it must be fulfilled. It follows then that any citizen adversely affected by any decree, order, or action of any official or body which is not properly authorized by the Constitution is entitled to the protection of the courts. No parliament, no official, and no institution is immune from judicial scrutiny in such circumstances. And so I think it's important because our courts have had to step in over the course of the last 3 years to ensure that this great and magnificent document is sustained and that its principles have been upheld. I also think that it's important that we meet today in Parliament, the very venue that gave birth to this Constitution 20 years ago, because this Parliament must play a very special role in protecting, defending, promoting, and enhancing the Constitution. The nation look up to Parliament. They take their lead from Parliament. We as parliamentarians need to every day be setting the example of how this Constitution must be able to give birth to the dreams, the hopes, the aspirations of ordinary South Africans. And I would like to, before I close, speak particularly to the young people in this audience today. Because there's become a populist trend to scapegoat the Constitution, to blame the Constitution for many of the ills which face South Africa today. And nothing could be further from the truth. Don't allow people to misfocus your anger on this document. There is no better guarantee for your future. There is no better weapon to fight for a better future. There is no better shield of your rights. And the only battle cry that you really need in South Africa today is "I Constitution Wami," because this is the weapon that's going to defend you, protect you, and sustain South Africa's multi-party democracy going forward. Thank you for the opportunity.
May I call upon the representative of the Inkatha Freedom Party to speak? Thank you.
Well, Honorable Moderator, Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Chairpersons of the NCOP, Honorable Judge Goldstone, former ministers and former colleagues in the National Assembly, esteemed guests, and our youth. On the 4th of February 1997, the sun rose on a new South Africa, a South Africa underpinned by a supreme constitution, which was the miracle product of multilateral conciliatory negotiations with stakeholders representatives of all peoples in our rainbow nation. Its underlying and guiding principle was that immortal declaration that, and I quote, "all men are created equal," unquote, as was stated in Chapter 7, when it affirmed the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom, whilst at the same time solemnly obligating the state to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. Our Constitution remains arguably one of the best in the world, with many international academics and jurists hailing it as the most admirable constitution in the history of the world. This is in no small measure due to its positive rights, which obligate the state to enact proactive policy in respect of reducing inequality. Our Constitution was never intended to be a static document. Its drafters realized and made necessary provision for amendments. It is a living document and one that can change and evolve in line with the times and with our democracy as it gradually matured. This would be its check and balance against redundancy in support of its relevance to the people of this country into perpetuity. Honorable Speaker and Honorable Mr. Moderator, there are areas which may require redress, the land issue for one, the mechanism for removal of the president, which, although not currently prescribed, should be by secret ballot in the National Assembly, and then provisions dealing with our national, provincial, and local government elections should also be looked at in respect of closing loopholes that may currently allow a detraction from the process of free and fair elections by unscrupulous persons. The constitutional review process should also not be solely confined to a committee. 20 years on, we should be opening up the process to the public, academics, business, and special interest groups. Ours is a constitution for all people, and all people should therefore have a say in how it develops. Honorable Moderator, A supreme constitution is of no use when our highest court in the land makes a legal finding against government and its order is treated with what can only be termed palpable contempt and not followed. Going forward, this government and its executive must ensure that they are beyond reproach in constitutional matters. Failing this, our democracy will be in serious trouble. In conclusion, the IFP celebrates today with the people of South Africa the supremacy and guiding light of the Constitution of our democratic republic. I thank you.
Thank you. Time running out of us, but next representative of the National Freedom Party, please.
Moderator, morning, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair of the NCOP, the panelists, Judge Goldstone, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans. We owe it to the icons, we owe it to the veterans, we owe it to the pioneers that today we are here and we have the Constitution which we celebrate. Now, the Constitution is more than just a document, more than an agreement between the state and citizen. It is our collective political and moral lodestar. When we adopted the Constitution 20 years ago, a new chapter in our collective history started, a chapter which held the promise of a united South Africa belonging to all who live in it. Our Constitution is as the result of a negotiated settlement, a living testimonial to the vision of those who were tasked to shape our hopes, our needs, and our dream into a living document. Our Constitution is inclusive by its very nature. It's also a reminder that we pulled back from the brink of an unspeakable violent confrontation between the state and the people. A reminder that we have not lost our deep sense of Ubuntu. Every constitution of every country is different. It speaks to the past of our country, for it is in the past where we find our hopes, dreams, and inspiration of a nation of a better tomorrow for generations to come. When we look at our broken history, twisted and riddled with hatred and intolerance as it was, we see the seeds of the foundation of our Constitution. We look back at the Sharpeville and Ilanga and Soweto in 1976 to recognize the absolute abuse of state power. And we understand that today the Constitution is ultimately our first and final line of defense against the might of the state. One cannot, moderator, talk about celebrating our Constitution and our Bill of Rights in particular without referring to our consummate icon of liberation, Utata Nelson Mandela. He said, and I quote, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others," unquote. We believe, moderator, that this guidance given to us to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others is embodied in our Bill of Rights. The core values of freedom, equality, and dignity, upon which our Bill of Rights are premised, is informed by our past. Each and every right enshrined in our Constitution had been bought through a sacrifice. I think that is important, especially to our youth, that it was bought through a sacrifice. And we must shine the culture of entitlement and work for our nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd appeal to the next speakers, just when I stand up, they must sit down. The next representative of the Freedom Front Plus, is anybody around? Doesn't seem to be. Next. They indicated they were not going to boycott me. Oh, it's okay. The next is representative of the ACDP. Please try and keep to 2 minutes. The others have robbed you of some time.
Thank you. The ACDP knows 2 minutes, so we're okay. Standing on the shoulders of heroes and heroines is hugely inspirational for us in the ACDP as well, and we will always be grateful for those who have gone before And we're inspired not only by those who have gone before, but those that we've been incredibly privileged to work shoulder to shoulder with as we began here. I only started in 1999, Reverend Mesha, from the start. And we have benefited as much as anybody from every single person who we've managed to, who we've come to sit at their feet, in a sense. Because people will see things from different perspectives, and we would never have had that opportunity if we were not included here. For the ACDP, it was as if, and I think for the whole of South Africa, it was if God stopped the world so we could all get on at that time in 1994 and before that in the preparation. So we are really grateful for that. And I can think of particular people. I think Speaker Bele Gambeti, how much you have been a mentor and inspiration to me. Kada Asmal, interestingly enough, Ben Turek. And one particular thing, I know when I first started, Ishmael Mohammed, Professor Ishmael Mohammed, he was the first person to actually encourage me and kind of come alongside me. And it was the most amazing experience, and I will never forget him. The ACDP's commitment to working to improve the end result of the Constitution was huge. And we did that it was never working against the Constitution. We fully appreciate a constitutional state and the Constitution we have. But there were things like the right to life of the unborn child that was hugely important, and we still believe that that would have improved the Constitution that we have. But having said that, there's also the freedoms that our Constitution, the democracy that our Constitution upholds. It makes it possible for our freedoms to stay intact, and particularly for us, the freedom of religion and belief is important, always has been important, and becomes more and more important even as we look globally, how important that is. And if we don't have a freedom to believe what we believe, we just cannot be who we are. We can't be ourselves. We lose our humanity. And in that we lose our dignity. So we are really grateful for a constitution that protects our freedoms, protects our freedom of religion and belief, and we thank you.
I did not mean to miss the UDM. They were in my list earlier. So Bantu, don't think I have a grievance against you. Representative of UDM, please.
I must apologize that my leader is not here. He had to go elsewhere. Thank you very much, Chairperson, and all protocol observed. Karl Marx once said, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. With these words, I'm trying to say that as young people and the people of South Africa must understand that the Constitution of the Republic is a product of our country, a product of our past, what's and all. As a result, I think it's important for us, as we appreciate this very progressive document, that we understand that therefore it's very difficult, as the moderator said, for us it would make us very bad leaders and students if we were to analyze the 1994-1990 perspective with a privileged 2017 perspective. As they say, hindsight is a perfect science. So we have to understand the political dynamics and the challenges that existed at the time. I think even if you read just the preamble of the Constitution, it says South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. That on its own tells you that it was built around compromises, trying to build and forge a nation together. Remember, this document is important, and the way it draws its legitimacy from, moderator, is the fact that it is not only essential in binding us together or constructing a state, but it is also instrumental in forging a nation and how we take it forward. As young people, therefore, what we must do is that, yes, we may have done very well insofar as the first generation human rights, but the discussion needs to begin around the second generation human rights, which are contained in the Bill of Rights, like your Section 26, Section 27, and Section 29, which will deal with socio-economic issues, education. Because you find that in some instances, in many instances, while these rights are guaranteed in the Constitution, but objective realities at times dictate otherwise, the quality of access, the issues that center around availability of those rights, and so on. That's the discussion we should be having. I suppose, to a large extent, in the broader scheme of things, even the debate around the land issue is trying to say, how do we tweak and change the structure, the productive structures of our economy? How do we ensure that we empower people? But we must do so responsibly as leaders, because it's the only document that binds us together as a nation. The other issue, which is very important before I sit down, you know, many of you, I'm sure here, I'm privileged to be speaking in front of you, participated in that process, and are probably wondering, what is this young man doing here who's probably in his nappies at the time? Well, I participated in that process in spirit as well, because I drew a lot of inspiration from the leaders of the time. Before I sit down, I want to say, when I was homeless in this province, it was the leaders who made sure that whenever they spoke to us, the likes of Nelson Mandela, who was the first one to articulate the principle of building an open opportunity society for all. When he said, for instance, we must make it possible for the son of the cleaner to become a president of the country. We must build an open opportunity society for all. That is what inspired me as a young person. That is what made me believe that South Africa is indeed alive with possibilities. As these leaders, that's what we must be doing. Before I sit down, Chairperson, I'm going to sit down, I promise. But I just ask one more thing of you that I conclude in saying, ladies and gentlemen, we have done well so far. But now we need to chart a new way forward, because we all have a responsibility to build a South Africa in which we all look forward to the sunrise of our tomorrow. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do notice that you're much younger than me, so when I stand up, it takes you a bit of time to sit down. Next, representative of the AIC. Oh, sorry. COPE, please. Otherwise, terror is going to terrorize me for the rest of my life.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Comrade Moderator. My dear friends, I'm very proud that we can join together to celebrate our Constitution today. I have heard in recent times talk that those who negotiated this Constitution sold out. And a question arises in my mind, and I must tell you this, at the negotiations, there's not a single section of the population that was excluded. There's not a single section of the population that was there represented which were not South Africans and who were not entitled to be in that meeting. So the question that must arise is, to whom did the people of South Africa who negotiated that, to whom did we sell out? There was no United Nations, there was no OAU, there was only us, the people of South Africa. So to whom did we sell out? Unless you don't accept that all of us are South Africans, you'll keep saying this thing, that we sold out. Now I hope the young people that are here will never forget that. This Constitution will never be renegotiated, because the meetings such as that negotiated it will never happen again. But we are all South Africans, and let me tell you very briefly why. First of all, before the Dutch came here, Africans lived here. The Khoi, the San, and later, of course, coming from the Northern Bantu sections of the population were here. The Dutch joined. They went to the east and they brought the Filipinos here. All of them lived together. There was no apartheid. Remember that apartheid was introduced in 1948. Then the English took over this area. They brought the Malay slaves here. Abdurrahman, the leader of those slaves, is buried on Robben Island because he led a rebellion here and was sentenced to death. The people intermingled, they lived together in peace. Peace treaties were there done among these people. Later on, there were religious wars in Europe. French Huguenots running away from war came here. That's where we get names such as Hubert, Leroux. All of them came here. Then there was religious wars after Martin Luther broke away from the Catholic Church. And Germans running away from who came here as fugitives. And they also settled here. Some of you drink Nederburg wine and all of that. Those people, they brought stocks of wine and all of plants, and they grew. The wine industry you see here is part the legacy they left us. Stellenbosch, which you now know as the home of, the so-called home of the Afrikaners. Van der Stel is the man who started that thing. And history records that one of his parents was a Filipino. I don't know. So when you look, therefore, when you talk about the people of South Africa, please, when you talk about the people of South Africa, you must count all of us. Because blood mixed and all of that. There's a people arose here and called colored. There's no land or country known as colored land. They were born and bred. It's all of us put together. After the emancipation of the slaves in 1834, large numbers left here complaining that their slaves have been released, and they went inland. This constitution is the product of all of us. The land some of the people want to take from others, you're going to take from our grandparents and great-great-parents. We are the inherited all of that, everywhere, the whole country. You will not find that there's nowhere where we are. We've been there. So please think carefully. If you want to take our land from us, to whom are you going to give it? Thank you.
You know, I was told by Madiba as an impeccable source that terror will always be terror. The next, Ahang, South Africa.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chairperson of NCOP, you must be complimented for today. It is very, very wonderful. Look, today we don't even have point of orders. And I can tell you, I can see why the Honorable former Minister was appointed or was nominated as one of the masters of Operation Vula. I've learned those tactics today. And I'm very, very thankful that I see at the back of me, I really see wisdom. I truly appreciate to be among these heroes of our times. And then in celebrating this constitution, it is justifiable to say those men and women who took part in the formulation of our constitution have delivered their difficult mandate with flying colors. We will never thank them enough for their noble contribution. Their tenacity and love for their country is unquestionable. Their valor and unshakable commitments must serve as a guiding light to our generation and future generation. We must guard this constitution with jealousy. It is what binds our nation together. But we must also thank the military wings of the liberation movement like Mkondo Wesizo, Apla, and others for laying down arms and recognize the negotiations towards building a rainbow nation. Honorable Speaker, you said mouthful when you say this constitution might have its flaws and compromises, but this constitution is worth celebrating. It still continues to teach us to live with each other. This constitution simply says we are one nation. We are one nation in diversity. Of course, there are challenges that require us to reflect, but the feeling of distress and unsatisfactory should not lead us to distraction or helplessness. Generation of today should emulate those great men and women who persevered and strived to find each other under very emotional and challenging times. This constitution is our victory. It's a victory of South Africa. It is a victory of the future. We must protect it at all costs. Thank you.
Thank you. A representative of the PAC? Anybody around? No. A representative of the APC? No. ANC? Here they are.
Honorable moderator, I nearly said honorable. When I sit here, I normally address honorable member. But indeed, I think the eminent persons we have here today are more than honorable, because they were party to giving us this glue that holds us together. We are very much thankful. Very much thankful. And again, let's thank the presence of Judge Goldstone. Because, you know, you will know, as we all know, that when it became quite clear that negotiations were inevitable in our country, our giant, an intellectual, a wonderful leader of our liberation struggle, O.R. Tambo, in his honor some of us speak today, sat and led the crafting of a wonderful document. A document that would say to all peoples and people and nations of the world, under what conditions would the ANC be prepared to enter into negotiations? And those conditions, perhaps it will be important that we allow our young people to understand what those conditions were, which Oliver Reginald Tambo took to the various institutions of Africa and of the world, and made all institutions of the world to agree with the attainment of that climate and conditions that would allow negotiations to take place in South Africa. That document said that there must be release of all political prisoners and detainees unconditionally, and indeed, the apartheid state must refrain from imposing any restrictions on parties. And it said there must be a lift of bans or lifting of banning and restrictions on all prescribed and restricted organizations and people. It said there must be removal of all troops from the townships. By the way, there were troops in the townships. Army, South African Defense Force. It said there must be the end of the state of emergency and repeal of all legislation such as and including the Internal Security Act designed to circumscribe political activity. Many of people who are here were imprisoned without trial. It's these conditions that needed to be corrected for negotiations to take place. And we are happy that through the work of Oliver Tambo, these conditions were created, and today we are able to speak of this wonderful constitution we have. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I was standing here and looking and seeing that the chief whip was always looking the other way. Took him time to turn towards me. But be that as it may, many people have mentioned one of the people who's present here today, who doesn't represent any political party, but so I'm going to break all the rules. I'd like to call on Judge Richard Goldstone. And it is my great pleasure, Judge, to be able to tell you that you've got 2 minutes only.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker and Honourable Chairperson. Thank you very much indeed for giving me the privilege and honour to be present and participate in the launch of this 20th anniversary. May I just make one reference? The Honourable Speaker referred and quoted from the decision of the Constitutional Court in the confirmation of the Constitution case. Let me say that was the greatest responsibility, I believe, that any court in any country in the world could have been given. To have to make a decision on effectively the constitutionality of the Constitution. A Constitution that had been drafted by the Constitutional Assembly, constituting all the elected representatives of both houses of our Parliament. And here 11 unelected justices had to say whether what they'd done was constitutional. And fortunately, we were unanimous in the first round in saying that it wasn't. And even more fortunately, the drafters of the interim constitution had the foresight to allow their Constitutional Assembly to have a second go at drafting and dealing with the problems. And they did that. And equally fortunately, when it came back to the Constitutional Court, we were also unanimous in saying this time it's correct. And we confirmed the Constitution. A huge responsibility. And in that context, I want to refer to the weakness, from a power point of view, of the judiciary. The separation of powers demands an independent judiciary. But that judiciary is entirely dependent for its work, for its efficacy, on being respected by the other two branches of the state, by the executive and by the legislature. And that should be borne in mind. Without that support and without that respect, the judges cannot succeed in fulfilling their constitutional duty in ensuring that the Constitution is abided by and implemented. And it should, in conclusion, I think on this occasion, we should also have regard and place on record the outstanding leadership that our judiciary has had since 1995, when the Constitutional Court was established. The leadership of Chief Justice Arthur Chaskison, Pius Langa, Sandile Nyobo, and the present Chief Justice, Mogoeng Mogoeng. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judge Goldstone. Now, the next request. I know we have students from all 9 provinces. I don't want a war in this room. I'm only requiring 1 student. Oh, well, now you see. This is what happens when I have a person on my left. I'm going to allow now 2 students, 1 male, 1 female. Is there a male student ready to say something for 2 minutes? Yes, sir.
Program Director, Moderator, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Justice Goldstone, distinguished panelists, honorable members and former members of Parliament, drafters of the Constitution, esteemed colleagues and guests, my name is Kamil Ali. I am the Deputy Secretary General of the WITS SRC and a member of the ANC Youth League and the South African Student Congress in good standing. I would like to thank the organizers of the event for giving us the opportunity of being here today. The reflections of the panelists reminds me of the material conditions that our institutions of higher learning faced in September and October last year, which is somewhat unsettling. I would like to begin by acknowledging the fact that we have made great strides in our constitutional democracy, but there is no doubt that more needs to be done. Section 29(1)(b) of the Constitution says, everyone has the right to further education, which the state, through reasonable measures, must make progressively available and accessible. The reality is that not enough has been done to make further education possible to the vast majority. NSFAS has failed us. We must acknowledge that. The only solution to our higher education crisis is free and quality education that is radically transformed. A fellow colleague from the opposition stood in this house a week or two ago and pronounced that we are a lost generation. I wish to refute that statement. We, as the next generation, have found our mission, and that is to deliver free and quality education for the poor and the missing middle now. Fees Must Fall has shown that we as young people appreciate the struggle that our predecessors endured to give us the Constitution. We are holding our leaders accountable and participating in the democracy that they have fought for. I wish to conclude by saying that the notion that young people are the future of our country is one that I fundamentally disagree with. It suggests that we as young people do not have the capacity to lead now. I say we are ready to take the baton and take this country to new heights and develop the Constitution to fit the South Africa we are now in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You see, when I allow the students to decide for themselves, I have to take into account that I had acknowledged somebody on this side and somebody on this side crept up. But this time, I'm going to do a different thing. We have a representative from one of our youngest universities, female representative. Your turn, my dear.
I would like to greet everyone who's available here at this moment. My name is Tshepiso Tshepe, the Deputy President of Salt Lake University. Mine is just to reflect on what has been said here and to also acknowledge what my colleague has said now when he was here on the stage. It is upon us as the youth. The baton has been passed to us and we are ready to take it forward. The Constitution, as they say, it is, the Constitution is our identity. It shares values that are shared amongst all of South Africans. At this moment, I would like to ask the people who are available here, even the panelists. I haven't heard them reflecting on issues that are facing our South Africans at this moment. Issue of leadership amongst women, it's one of the important things that they could have touched on. And the other thing is that as a student from a new university, the opportunity that we have been given to come here and represent our new university and all students among South Africa, it's a great opportunity. This document that was being spoken about, it has expressions of inclusivity, and then it embraces all our interests. But what I would also like them to also touch on is that once this constitution was being implemented, once the thought was being placed, it was placed on the issue of leadership with respect, leadership with understanding. But at this moment in this parliament, what I've observed is that we have been led by people who are actually not doing what they thought would be possible. We see a lot of mishappenings that are going on. So I would also like them to touch on that next time these dialogues are being exercised. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, Madam Chairperson, I think what we've engaged in this morning tells us that when we celebrate the adoption of our Constitution, we should do so, with all solemnity, but also with with a sense of pride, and lastly, with a sense of joy for life. That it was possible, and it is possible in the world, in the midst of the most horrendous conflicts, to find a way to peace. And I think we want to hold our experience not as something out there divorced from the life of people, but as a constitution that becomes living because it is work in progress in the sense that it has to be implemented daily. And that implementation is not just a function of Parliament. It's a function of every one of us as citizens. So I hope that today's function will leave us with that message. But I want to also conclude by welcoming not just the inputs, but the level of the inputs. I would have liked to have some lighter moments. I would have liked to have asked the panelists their most embarrassing moments during the negotiations. I have one. There was a joint meeting of the National Party and the ANC at Union Buildings. It was a full house meeting, almost more than 20 representatives of the ANC. I think some of you present were there. And there was almost the whole National Party cabinet. And I decided to play to the gallery of the ANC. And I attacked the late Minister Ernest Kriel, chapter and verse. And the more I attacked him, the more I got worked up. And the more I went on attacking him. I went on for so long that I lost the support of the ANC. And then when I finished and sat down, I thought I had blown this man out of the water. And Ernest Kriel just turned to the chair and said, "Mr. Chairman, can we continue with our meeting?" Now, Vali, you were there. I think Balega was there. I think Bridget was there. Why don't you tell this story about me? You'll only tell the good things about me. But on a more serious note, one of the things that gives dynamism is not just the separation of powers the way we talk about it. There are actually 4 centers of power in our Constitution. One is the legislature and the assembly and the NCOP. The other is the judiciary. There's a third one, Chapter 4 institutions. So when we talk about separation of powers, we need to be mindful that this Constitution is packaged with power distributed in these 4 centers: the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the Chapter 4. Chapter 9. And one of the things that gives it its dynamism is that each of these centers of power will want to get more power for itself. And that jostling is healthy. And we must treat it as a healthy thing. But the legitimacy of this Constitution rests in the legislature. We all derive our power because that is the elected body. If we ever move to a point of overbalancing it in favor of the appointed structures, we will run the danger of robbing it of its legitimacy as a democracy. So that's the context in which this contestation, this tussle, this dynamism has to take place. With respect for each of the institutions, with an understanding that each will try and should flex its muscles, but that in this process, what generations have fought for was the right of people to have a say in their destiny, and that first institution that they created was the legislature. I am saying this not in the spirit of criticizing any single institution. I'm saying this in the spirit of trying to understand what makes our system dynamic living. And therefore my appeal would be, as we celebrate this occasion, let us find other occasions to have similar reflections, both serious and lighthearted, where we recall where we've come from so that the past has meaning in the present, and so that everybody understands that those who are at the coalface of building this nation today have to do so with the responsibility that goes with freedom. And reflect also the differentiation between freedom and democracy, and understand at all times that with this comes a huge responsibility. So colleagues, if you want me to be serious, I could go on for a long time. But I think it's enough. I think that the attempts to shut me up by making me a moderator have failed. And it's been a great honor to share this occasion with all of you, and to understand at the same time there are so many people out there who should be here today in this room, because in their own ways they made an immense contribution to where we are today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Moderator Comrade Meg Maharaj, for conducting the session. I know it was difficult because many of us seated here would have liked to contribute. But what I think all of us would agree, and Speaker and Chairperson, Secretary, and the Chief Whips of parties would agree, that today we're laying the basis of a year-long conversation. And I think some of the questions that were raised by the students attest to that fact, that more dialogue will have to happen amongst those who crafted the Constitution and the current generation. The student from Sol Plaatje asked very pointed questions. Why did you do this? She also made observation on the present parliament. What we see is not what we thought was thought by those who were crafting the Constitution. I think the serious conversation that as a society we'll have to continue to have, but thank you for giving us a start. Yesterday, Nguku Tiongo, speaking at Wits University in Braamfontein, mentioned very interesting thing which was cited as we were discussing, that history is very important for any society because it helps you to know who you are. Also mentioned the importance of language and culture and why language was actually used as a form of subjugation by the colonizers. And he made a very interesting reference because he was saying, I want to draw parallels, South Africa and also the rest of the world. And he used the island and the British when they colonized Irish. He said, after some years, the British were asking themselves, why can't we deal with these Irish? And one of them said, it's in the names. The names that they carry, the names of their language, which tells of that identity. And I think, looking back, what we did during the negotiations process was to ensure that all South Africa's languages are equal, to affirm all of our identity in our diversity. The conversation is going to continue. But in order for you who were the first ones in this launch, in the beginning of this conversation, I want to say from this parliament, you can have the DVD, which was the one that we flighted earlier, during lunchtime. So if you leave before lunchtime, tough luck. Secondly, the book from Theme 4 on the reflections on the Bill of Rights, which we launched last year as this Parliament, and we are the repository, not Theme 4, of this document as part of building our history. It's available, and it's on sale. It's also going to be sold during lunchtime in the old assembly chamber, and it's very reasonable because we have to recover the costs for printing and all. It's 257 rand, few cents only. So that the oversight committee where the parties are sitting, Steenhuisen and others, don't ask us about the money. So I'm trying to recover the costs for printing this document. But it's a very good book because it gives the reflections from those compatriots of our country who drafted the Constitution, particularly those who were in Theme 4. When we leave here, we will actually be led by the two presiding officers out the main door to look at the exhibition. But because we are many, while some of us will be doing that, I will ask those who are having yellow tags to start by eating lunch on the second floor. And those who will go with the first group, they will have their lunch in the old assembly restaurant. But it wouldn't be nice to just disperse you without being thanked, even myself for cheering, for being here. The Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the vote of thanks. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Program Director. Perhaps I should start with you by recognizing the contribution that you have made today. The Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, honorable members. On behalf of the executive authority of Parliament, which is the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Chair of the National Council of Provinces, I hereby wish to take the opportunity to first thank the panel for the kind of information that they had shared with us, their experiences. It was quite enriching. It was quite enlightening. To some of us, Honorable Mkwankwa, don't worry. We were all there in spirit. And today, at least now, we could get it from those who actually participated in that. So thank you very much to the panel. To other comrades who were there, I might not call all of them. I might not have had the opportunity to have seen everybody. So to avoid a situation of calling one name and miss the other, may I thank everybody who was part and parcel of the process and who saw it and deemed it fit to be with us today to celebrate our Constitution and say thank you very much to all of you. Most importantly, like the Speaker had said, the young people, the students, who have traveled from all over the country, from their provinces and so forth, to have been with us. We hope that you have learned a lot. You will be able to take some of these things home. It's not only about something that you have read or that you have been reading. At least now you heard it from the horse's mouth. The most exciting and the most embarrassing moments, as the moderator was also expressing his own embarrassing moments, which to me, it's not an embarrassing moment, but quite an experience that one can learn from, to say that it's not always necessary to punch. but rather to always try and balance and see whether if you are able then to take everybody along and move forward. What a lesson. Thank you very much for that, moderator. Like the program director said, this is but just the beginning of a dialogue. This is a launch. It is not the end of the program. This program is going to unfold, to be rolled out over the year, throughout the year, because the celebration of our 20 years of the Constitution and the 20 years of the establishment of the National Council of Provinces does not start and end here today. It is a program that is going to be rolled out through lecture programs. We'll be going to universities. There will be activities that will be taking place at high school level. We will be, of course, encouraging also municipalities to then also piggyback on some of the programs that will be taking place in our respective provinces, our municipalities, our wards, if it is possible, those that will be able then to ensure that even our councillors do have an understanding of the celebration of our Constitution, and through their ward committees, ward public meetings, and engage the public around the importance of the Constitution and so forth. And also, as public representatives, as members of parliament, all of us, we've got our constituencies. We will be going for constituency periods. Let's ensure that part and parcel of our programs in our constituencies also speak to the celebration of our Constitution. And in doing so, contribute towards a social cohesion, which is nation building, which is to build a South Africa that this Constitution envisaged to see. So therefore, it is very much important that we don't see this event or the activity of today as an end to itself, but rather as a beginning of a process that will ensure that as we move forward, we are then able to build a South Africa where everybody, including our great-grandchildren, will be comfortable and look back and say, yes, of course, our great-grandfathers, mothers were there. They contributed, and we are what we are today because of them. Thank you very much to everybody, and we wish all those who are going back home a safe journey back home, and happy birthday to our Constitution and the National Council of Provinces.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the close of this seminar, of this launch. I'll now ask our presiding officer, the two of them, to lead by being the first to go out of our main door, and then we will follow. Those of us with yellow tags, we can start by eating, and thereafter go to the exhibition.
Nelson Mandela! Haunayat! Nelson Mandela!
Mandela, Nelson Mandela,
Haunayat! Haunayat Hanaliena! Haunayat Hanaliena! Dade Madiba!
Nancy Madiba, Nancy Madiba, Haunali Swawiwe.
Dade Madiba!
Nancy Madiba. Spanile kan få table, happy. I was just. Ah.
this one is fine.